The second part of this that's going to really rile you up is Biden went out of his way in this budget to include a proposal for $32 billion in increased spending for law enforcement to fight crime, according to Axios. And this puts his actions to words from his State of the Union when he promised to fund, not defund, the police.
We should all agree the answer is not to defund the police. That's right. It's to fund the police. Fund them.
So, Hannah, for all the progressives out there, they need to come get their man, huh? Because he really sold the defund the police crowd for a loop here.
This is not what anybody asked for, sir. I don't know, though. I mean, they deserve what they get, honestly. Like, this was so predictable. It was very obvious at the heels of the Black Lives Matter movement and all of these protests and this huge, almost national universal call for criminal justice reform. On the heels of that, we elect two of the cop politicians who are most responsible for the system that we currently have. And these were supposed to be our saviors. Like, how dumb can you be? Come on. This drove me nuts because at the time of the election, I was working in criminal justice reform and I had a lot of left-leaning colleagues. And I was like, how can you support this? Like, this doesn't track. I'm not saying vote for Trump. I'm saying vote Libertarian. I'm saying vote Independent. I'm saying anything else, because how in the world does it make sense to think this guy's going to come in and do anything different? And that's been true. You know, I've been tracking this. He has had 1 full year in office now. It has been an abject failure, as we've discussed in multiple ways on this show. But I think in one of the biggest ways is in his total lack of any criminal justice reform whatsoever. He's had control of the Senate and House. He should have been able to actually get some bipartisan stuff done. Republicans love criminal justice reform. He could easily have focused his attention on getting some very important things done over the past year. Instead, he put all of his energy trying to cram Build Back Better down our throats, trying to increase protections for his union thug buddies. He's just been absolutely terrible, and it's frustrating because as that's been happening, lives have been lost to this system. You know, we continue to put people in jail for merely possession or buying an edible. Like, you could have easily passed marijuana reform during that time. There's mass appeal for that. He's not lifted a finger. He's not been commuting sentences. He's not been pushing for any real criminal justice reform. And it actually makes me really angry that the people in his camp aren't holding his feet to the fire. Like, he's not my man. This is not my problem. You guys voted for him. You put him in there, and now look what he's doing. The first thing he's going to do on criminal justice reform is actually expand policing. And within that also means he's expanding the Justice Department, which anybody on the right should be upset by. We know how corrupt they've been over the past year and really dating back for decades if you look into it. He's also going to be giving federal prosecutors a lot more funding and attention, I see, under this bill. That's terrifying. Prosecutors are some of the most corrupt people in our system. I did a whole episode based on them and the issues within that. And then we're going to have 300 new deputy marshals. I saw it's a huge increase of the police state, which again is what is used to carry out violations against you, like against your Second Amendment, against privacy. It's what's used to survey people. It's used to constantly violate our basic property rights through really corrupt things they're doing around warrants. On and on it goes. The idea that we're going to give these corrupt government officials so much more money makes me sick. And I know why he's doing it, and that's because the media and many on the right have been trying to hype up crime in the country. And crime has increased in some facets over the past year. It's decreased or stayed even in others, but it's been a pretty sexy story to try to sell, and that I think a lot of people have run with on the right because they don't like the defund the police narrative, and so they've tried to really highlight, like, oh, look, they defunded the police, and other those crime. It's not really true. Nobody ever got defunded, first and foremost. I think one or two maybe voted to defund, and then they immediately got that back. No police departments were actually defunded in this country. And the reason that we've seen spikes in crime have a lot more to do with things like the lockdown, shutting down after-school services and programs and things of that nature, than it does to do with anything around policing. And lastly, I'll just say we've been throwing lots of money at policing for decades in this country. We've greatly expanded their budgets. We've greatly expanded the equipment that they get. They get tons of resources, and yet they still really suck at solving crime. We have a 60% average homicide clearance rate in this country. We solve less than 30% of rapes in this country. We don't even test the rape kits in this country. We solve less than 19% of property crimes in this country. They are not people who are going to protect or defend us or our property or our person. What they're going to do is take that money, go chase drug crimes, and use it to civil asset forfeiture people and take their property and enrich themselves. And I'm tired of people being really unwise about this and not waking up to the total sham that is policing in this country.
But they just need more money, Hannah. The problem is they haven't been able to do a good job because we haven't given them enough tax dollars, the police.
Yeah, that's always their argument. But if you look again, they've actually got major pay increases across most cities over the past year, and yet crime got worse. Why did they never have to answer for that? If giving them more money actually helps make us safer, why did they never answer for the fact that when they get more money, crime stays the same or goes up? I'm so tired of these people, and it's their unions and it's individual police too. Like, I don't have this mentality that a lot of people on the right have of like, back the blue. Absolutely not. No, there are some good cops in this country, but most of them end up leaving because they recognize that the system they're working in is so corrupt that they actually cannot uphold the Constitution and defend individual rights within it. And then the people end up getting corrupted by the so-called bad apples that they're surrounded by. And as a whole, you have a whole entity that exists and takes our money mostly just to rob us. They actually physically steal more from American citizens every year than burglars do under civil asset forfeiture. They constantly violate people's basic rights and liberties. This is not something where they're actually even going out and preventing or solving crime. They actually are using those resources against you. They also use it to go after people's Second Amendment rights. They often use civil asset forfeiture to take away people's guns. People have got to get wise to this because this whole emotional narrative of like, police are there for you, they put their lives on the line for you. No, they don't. They don't even have a duty, according to the Supreme Court, to actually intervene on your behalf. We would all be better if we kept our dollars and could hire private security, and then maybe we'd actually see a dent in crime in this country.
Well, you sprinted to my left a little there. I'm not on the abolish police private security train, but I do agree with your general thought and premise, which is the problem with policing is not that we don't give them enough money. I tend to think it's that they have a system that preserves all the bad actors through the unions and the qualified immunity, and then also we ask them to do far too much, right? We have them playing drug warriors and drug cops when really they should be focusing on all those unsolved rapes and everything. But you mentioned the Second Amendment, and I want to ask you about this because this part will especially upset people on the right. Biden's request for an increase in funding for law enforcement specifically asks for a budget boost for the ATF, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives. It would pay for 140 new ATF agents and investigators working on gun trafficking strike forces in 5 major U.S. cities and 160 ATF investigators working on gun dealer compliance. I'm of the mind that the ATF should be abolished and does nothing of any utility, but apparently Biden thinks they just need more agents.
So you are fine with abolishing some police, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, well, absolutely. ATF, because they're just essentially nanny state Karens. Like, adults can handle tobacco themselves. Like, we don't need a police agency. And I also believe almost all policing should be local, should not be federal, with the exception of maybe, like, terrorism stuff.
My compromise for people who aren't for fully privatizing police, which is where I am, my compromise would be if we're going to have them, they should function like the fire department. You come when we call you. You come when there's a true emergency. You actually do put your life on the line. You actually do go in and rescue people and keep people safe. And then you follow up after the fact to make sure that any criminal details are handled or solved. That's how it should actually look. Things like the ATF, though, is a no-brainer. They shouldn't exist. It's absolutely ridiculous. These people are best known for murdering dogs, carrying out atrocities against American civilians. It's frightening to think that we're going to increase the number of these losers on our streets. Like, good grief, I can't think of a worse government agency to expand. And it should concern everybody because I think one thing people might not be aware of is that with a lot of these a lot of the criminal justice kind of focused on in major cities, especially places like New York, that have liberal people controlling them, is they've started looking at doing things like creating these agencies within policing that actually specifically go after quote, quote, gun trafficking, right? Which really just means that they are paroling the streets for people who have guns that have been bought through third-party sellers and any way that aren't like actually licensed or regulated. And so New York City especially has started putting some resources behind that. And so this seems to be in lockstep with some of those initiatives in actually creating more of a federal capacity for carrying out these kinds of street teams that are, what could possibly go wrong? So this is just all in all an atrocious idea. I think there's something in here for both people on the right and the left to hate. I really hope this gets stripped out of the budget by the time it gets to Congress. But you know what? Police are powerful lobbyists.
It'll probably get doubled.
Increased. Yeah, police spend a lot of your tax dollars, and this is one thing I'm passionate about, taxpayer-funded lobbying. Police spend a lot of your dollars going in and lobbying against you and lobbying heavily to get these kinds of reforms passed. And they have a very emotional sort of argument where they come in and they say, like, we need this to solve crime, to keep people safe, to keep us safe. And again, it's totally detached from reality and actually what's happening on the field with them. But it's an emotional talking point. Politicians are scared to go up against police because then police will go and say, this person's weak on crime, they're soft on crime, they don't care about police. And then voters will go, oh my gosh, you don't care about police, and they'll turn on them. And so it's really easy for them to lobby in this regard. And again, they have unlimited resources because they do it on your tax dollars, which should make everybody pretty angry. So I don't feel very hopeful about this.
Yeah.